The vast majority of them are fundamentally good people caught in a very bad system and situation. There's not a path out for them without literally risking their lives. We're trying to create a path out that's safe, that can transition out, but it's fraught. It's very dangerous. And they know that. We cannot allow an unappointed, unsupervised, illegal operation to continue to endanger the earth and engage in these kinds of ridiculous operations. I've checked with them. I'm okay to say what I'm about to tell you. And what I'm about to tell you is it's explosive and sensitive, as if all of this isn't. But there's a special access project, top secret, special compartmented information, that's under a law enforcement entity that has been, we've been briefing the person who's been asked to direct that for about 20 months now, and also his senior operators. And these are guys who've been Green Berets, special forces, who separated from the military now and are prepared under executive order to go forward and get the most sensitive and damaging aspects of these illegal covert operations under control here in the United States. They also have a plan to do it, what's called OCONUS, outside the continental United States. CONUS is continental United States. OCONUS is outside continental United States. So that they have been asked to do that, but they have not yet gotten the funding and the go to do it. Now, with what's coming out this week and in the subsequent weeks and months, because this is going to be a gradual release over the next few months, that urgently needs to happen. It absolutely, and this is in the executive orders for the incoming president, the current president, and the Congress. Ironically, if you go into our archive, you'll see those same recommendations were made to Bill Clinton 30 years ago. So, you know, it's kind of, for me, we won't get in what it's been like for me, but yeah, a long, mind-blowing and frustrating and death-defying journey. But at this point, we're at this inflection point where all that can get resolved, because there are enough people. There's been a generational change. There are enough people in the mid to upper levels of these covert programs that want out. They want it to, let's call it they're calling these legacy programs, the old operations from the 40s till now. They want out of that, and they want a pathway out. This is why that operation, we're hoping, will not have the hardliners prevail. They'll have the moderate and intelligent people who are looking forward in a positive way prevail. If that happens, it's a new world. And if it doesn't happen, it could be very dangerous. So the stakes here cannot be overstated. I'm not trying to be frightening to people, but it cannot be overstated. Now, the good news is that there is a kind of a critical mass of people coming forward who want to see that happen. The bad news is that the constitutional leaders who are elected and appointed don't have enough information, and they don't have enough detail to make these assessments. We're offering to do that, help them with this. It's also why this team of guys who are defecting, who dealt with this very up front, you know, and at a high level. The lead guy I've been dealing with has been involved since 1995, almost 30 years, as a young special forces guy, and now he's high up in there. So we're wanting to help the governments here and around the world come together and figure out a path forward that is peaceful and is a transformation rather than a conflict. So that's our objective. And by the way, this is why, if you go all the way back to the Clinton era, I had recommended a period of amnesty for people who've been involved in these programs. And even though there have been some horrific things done, kidnappings, murder, torture, embezzlement of, in the aggregate, probably trillions of dollars of federal monies, et cetera, and so on, that if people come forward and they actually come clean and are agree to make a new chapter happen that's a beautiful development for humanity, that they have amnesty extended to them. Now, those of you who have followed the minutia of this, you know, about a year ago in late December of 2023, the National Defense Authorization Act, which had a provision for safe harbor, which is amnesty for these kinds of figures, was passed unanimously by the Senate the day after our June, or early July, no, it was June 2023 National Press Club event. They passed that, and I had helped people there that I was working with put the right language in that Senate amendment to the Defense Authorization Act, and that got passed overwhelmingly by the Senate, but it was ripped apart in the House of Representatives by just a handful of bad actors who I'm pretty certain are on in the back pocket of these legacy, covert, and rather disturbing programs. We know who they are, and we're watching that very carefully. But that means that at this point, you're going to need to revisit that in the Congress and also in the White House, because this can be extended through the Department of Justice through immunities and other mechanisms in the executive branch, and it can also be done by revisiting this in the Congress, which I've been told in meetings with folks attached to the senior folks attached to the Senate Intelligence Committee are part of that operation, that they are going to pursue that again. But the reason that's important is that, you know, an eye for an eye leaves the whole world blind. What we all want, including my friends who are coming forward, they're like brothers in arms, as it were, coming forward with all this information. We really want this to be a positive, transformative event and not a conflict. And that is very well within the possibility now. But there are certain things that we, the people, need to ask our government to do, whether it's Congress or the president. And there's a new president. By the way, I am not a partisan. I have dealt with every administration and both sides of the aisle since 1992 and 93. So just to be clear, this project is it's global and it's nonpartisan. But we deal with whoever is the office of the president, the presidency, but also whoever's in Congress and whoever's in charge of the key oversight committees. And that changes with each election. Okay, so, which is the way democracy works. It's fine. Now, the bigger issue is if this isn't started very quickly, and this is my biggest worry right now, is that there can be no foot dragging about standing up that operation and getting these swords, these very super high-tech swords that are in covert, illegally run programs, turn into plowshares, and the ones that stay as swords need to be monitored and put on a very short leash. That has not happened, and because there is no legal controlling authority, let's say, constitutionally here or in Great Britain or in other countries where I've been, Australia, where I've met with their Minister of Defense, etc., that have knowledge of this or control over it. So that is actually a big threat to world and national security. The biggest part of the threat is that we continue to use very advanced directional energy weapons, electromagnetic pulse weapons like you have from an atomic bomb that are turned into a signal that has embedded within a scalar, what Tesla calls a scalar signal, which is faster than the speed of light. We target these extraterrestrial vehicles or NHI craft, and then we bring them in through mechanisms we can talk about in another podcast and hit them and disable them and bring them down. Sometimes they're brought down intact. Sometimes they're blown to smithereens. And the people coming forward have dealt directly, operationally, with those strikes and with the targeting and downing of these extraterrestrial vehicles. In fact, when I was in this gentleman, our code name right now until he comes out in the next few hours and days is the Knock, because he's a non-official cover guy. in OC. When I went out to his sites last year, right before I was critically injured, we and the director of this strike team, law enforcement team, Green Beret, were in his chopper, and we flew over 2 of these black sites that he's over and involved with. And at one of them, as we were flying around that site in the opening, the underground opening, where the man-made craft come up that look like UFOs and are tested over this range. And we have all these photos and videos, by the way, and they're in our archive. Care to look at them. He said that 1 or 2 ET craft a year, even now, are targeted and downed over that one site. Now, remember, there are sites like this all over the world, not just the United States. So what does that mean? That means that while there's no evidence that these civilizations visiting us are hostile, they are certainly concerned about our hostility. And the only question is the patience and largesse that have been shown to us as an evolving younger brothers and sisters in the cosmos. How much longer will that patience last when our technologies, by studying theirs, the extraterrestrial technologies, become more and more powerful and more dangerous and accurate, and we're using it against the extraterrestrial peoples and their craft and perhaps their worlds. So I think this gets into a bigger national security and global security issue, is that we're going to have to come together as a whole world and have a global treaty to keep these weapons and these technologies free of weapons against each other and against out in space. And we cannot put any of these weapons or allow any of them in space that are being used this way, either against each other or against these civilizations. One of the problems with all the space treaties is that they leave out one key ingredient. And I understand there's a treaty that's been verbally agreed to by China, Russia, and 40 other countries to ban and keep all of those weapons off of craft and out of space, and that those other countries are ready to sign it. I strongly recommend the United States sign it, because we cannot act as if we're operating in a vacuum. I've always said we're going out into space and doing these things, not calculating into this the fact that we're not alone. And the idea, people just sort of think, well, we're the only game in town in the whole cosmos. Well, we're not. And we're sort of the younger brothers and sisters coming along technologically, but we cannot allow an unappointed, unsupervised, illegal operation to continue to endanger the Earth and engage in these kinds of ridiculous operations. So that requires us beginning to think through what is the global response, both in terms of us working together as humans and humanity, but also what is our response to these visitors. So in 1990, 35 years ago, I started a program called Close Encounters of the Fifth Kind. You can look at the movie by the same title. It's for free to see on a number of sites, but you can see it on our YouTube channel, I believe. Is that right? Not yet. Well, you will be. The point is that movie describes the program of humans coming together as sort of citizens, ambassadors, making peaceful contact. Now, the guys that are coming forward from these covert programs, they really love that idea. And they love the idea that we take and pivot away from a confrontational stance to a peaceful dialogue and open, peaceful contact. And that we go from using these amazing technologies in a way that harms and kills, however covertly, to something that would generate, quote, free energy for the Earth and heal the Earth and the environment and eliminate poverty globally, and would be this great tide that would lift all of humanity up out of the condition we're in now. Because as you know from looking at the Lost Century, and I believe you can see that on Tubi and some other streaming places, it describes that we've lost 100 years of human evolution due to the sequestering and the secrecy of these advanced technologies, all the way back to the time of Nikola Tesla. So we need to play about 100 years catch up here. And we also need to do it on other levels in terms of human consciousness and our social evolution, so that we're no longer having to view everything we don't understand as an enemy to shoot at. And unfortunately, that is a fact. I remember sitting, and excuse my language here, but in Senator Barry Goldwater's living room back in the 90s. And he was the senior Arizona senator who ran against Lyndon Johnson in 1964 for president, and was a very conservative Republican. And he knew of this subject just through contacts in the military, but he never had been read into it, even as a presidential candidate for the Republicans, or as chairman of different committees over the years, and a ranking member. He's a very senior senator. And he said he had been denied access to any of these programs. And when he asked about them, was actually threatened by a close friend of his, General 𝗪𝗘𝗦𝗧, who had been chief of staff of the Air Force. And he was told, General 𝗪𝗘𝗦𝗧 said to Senator Goldwater, I don't even have access to those programs anymore. But, and you can't. And if you ask me about it again, I'll see you court-martialed out of the Air Force Reserve. Senator Goldwater was in the Air Force Reserve. But one of the conclusions that Senator Goldwater reached, he said, and this was back about 30 years ago, sitting at his home out in Scottsdale, Paradise Valley, that area. And he says, it was a goddamn mistake then. It's a goddamn mistake now that this was ever kept secret. So now, saying it ain't making it so. So I said, well, Senator, I absolutely agree with you, but what are we going to do about it? And so that is, the evolution of this has been that once you start on a path, this secret, and then it diverts off of constitutional oversight, which is what happened. This group did this in the late 1950s, and it's been like that ever since. Then how do you fix that without it being absolutely scandalous and difficult? And so there's an inertia. Most people, when they realize what the truth is about this, they go, let's just leave this alone. Let's not shake the boat here, rock it too much. But now we've reached the point, environmentally, geopolitically, but also the threat of these technologies in the hands of the wrong people, getting used more and more and more in an aggressive way, and in a way that could harm the interests of all of humanity. So I think there's a big wave of change happening. And I'll never forget, I think it was last year, or about a year and a half ago or so, and a gentleman who works with this covert group that's coming forward and defecting. He was driving me from one place to another in Southern California. And when he dropped me off at a place where I was going to stay, he turned to me, and it was very emotional. This is a special forces guy. He said, Dr. Greer, thank you for what you're doing for those of us stuck on the other side. What do you mean? He meant stuck in these illegal programs, but they want out. And they got in those programs not knowing that they were illegal. So let me frame this for people a little bit. Everyone says, well, the government's hiding this and that. Well, the government, like I said, knows very little about this matter, because it's compartmented, but it's compartmented under an illegal operation or a deep black program. The other part of it is that so many of the people in those programs are really genuinely patriotic, and they're genuinely courageous, wonderful people. But by the time they realized, and you have to get very high up in the program, very high up, to realize it's being run unconstitutionally and illegally. They're in there and they're had. It's like, they're made men, and there's not a path out for them without literally risking their lives. I'll just put that on the table. So we're trying to create a path out that's safe, that can transition out, but it's fraught. It is very dangerous. And they know that. And these are conversations I have privately with all of these people who are in that situation. But keep in mind, they're wonderful people. They're courageous. They're the best and the brightest. They really are. And they want to do the right thing now. And so I think we, the public, have to understand that. We have to not paint everyone involved with these programs with the same brush, because many of them are actually victims of having been in service or in a corporation, and they move up through the system. They're tested as to whether they'll keep secrets. And then they move into something that is very advanced technology, advanced operations, dealing with non-human craft and all of this, UFOs, UAPs. And even then, initially, they think, well, the president knows, the Congress knows, it's classified, but it's under the correct oversight. Now, it's very difficult when they realize, oh my God, I'm inside a criminal operation, a criminal organization. Because how do you get out and live to tell the tale? Because they do face the potential of what are called wet works, or targeted assassinations and killings. So, which of course we all do, me, myself included. But I think that, you know, at this point, there's enough wanting to do this, and there's enough support for it within, let's say, covert structures that are wanting to pivot away from those what are being called legacy, the old guard, into this new era. And we need to be kind and supportive and understanding to people who, by no fault of their own, found themselves trapped in a system, and they didn't know that they were in a program that was not legal. How would they? I mean, because if you understand the nature of a compartmented operation, you don't know if you're in one compartment and your best friend is in another, no one discloses it, and it's hermetically sealed, like a silo that's separate. I've sort of been a silo smasher for 34 years, going across silos and across various compartmented operations. As a civilian, I have no government association whatsoever. I'm totally a private person. But at the same time, because of that compartmentalization, they're not at a level where they know who the leadership and what's being done, who's being lied to in Congress or in the White House, what kind of machinations are going on at that very high level. Now, the weird and strange thing about my life is I started at that time. I started as a young doctor being asked to come in and brief a sitting director of the CIA who genuinely had been denied access, and the president, his president, Bill Clinton, had been denied access, and then subsequently threatened. But I don't want to go into that right now. We'll see what this team that comes forward says about that. I know the whole story, all of it, virtually all of it. And that was President Clinton. And you know, he tried to fix this problem. He did. But he ran into a buzzsaw. Let's just put it that way. So I think that we have to have compassion even for that. Because look, we all put our pants on one leg at a time. And you know, it's daunting and it's dangerous, and not everyone's got the stomach to do everything that needs to be done when your fortune and your life and everything's on the line. And that's, you're either cut out of that cloth or you're not. And when you're talking about the moneyed and privileged and political class, that's not a very common attribute. But amongst these special forces men and women, and the ones who moved up through the system who now want to come forward, they are made out of the right stuff and cut out of that cloth, and they're very courageous. So we need to honor them. And I think we need to respect the situation they found themselves in. Imagine going from a 19 or 20-year-old guy, right, in a special operations, running into this subject, and then eventually you rise up to where you're now middle-aged, and you're high enough up, and you realize at some point, oh, damn, this operation is completely illegal and unconstitutional operation. But at that point, how do you get out and live to tell about it? It's a very big problem. I'm trying to build some compassion in the public here for the conundrum we're in. We're all in. I'm in that too, because I hold information and knowledge and names and places, and I named it my dead man trigger. Something happens to me, it all comes out. It's my insurance policy. But that are, you know, disturbing, that I've never disclosed, and don't plan to. But I think that at the same time, we have to put that all, take that little example I gave you of these courageous men coming forward, multiply it through the system. And so there are a lot of very good people who, whether they're corporate or government or intelligence or whatever, or a hybrid of both. A knock is often both. You know, have someone who's intelligence, but they're also corporate. So they have non-official covers. You have media people who are actually knocks. I know who some of them are. They don't know I know, but I know. And so that becomes something where at a certain point, you do it for all the right reasons, but then you realize you're in a very bad and corrupt enterprise when it's too late. I want everyone to understand this. I know I'm dwelling on it a bit because there needs to be context of understanding how people got there, and they're humans. And, you know, there's some very misguided humans that have done some, you know, frankly, very evil things, and they're like evil geniuses. At the same time, the vast majority of people, even in these aerospace companies and in these intelligence and military units dealing directly with this issue, the vast majority of them are fundamentally good people caught in a very bad system and situation, not of their making. They inherited it.
If you like this video and you want to see more amazing content, go ahead and check out the next video on our channel.